Awesome. Welcome to my kitchen, everybody. I'm super glad to be with you in this way today here at the Lighthouse Kitchen um, for our second resiliency session, which is a total honor to be able to contribute in this way during these interesting times that we're in. So my idea with these resiliency sessions was to bring a lot of the things that I find myself talking about in the Zen Zone office with people in a one-on-one context, to bring that into a sort of tutorial context while we're all, shored up in our own homes, and to give you some living, real-time examples of some really simple, rejuvenative foods that I personally reach for and have been reaching for a really long time. Not only when the going gets rough, which it is right now, but also just for general maintenance. So for these 30 minutes that we have together today for this resiliency session, I want to introduce you to a couple of core foods that that I'm in love with. The first of which is khichdi. And some of you may or may not be familiar with that, but based on the few faces that I saw a moment ago before the screen opened up, my guess is that some of you are familiar. So I've done a little bit of pre-work with the foods that we are going to be exploring this morning, just for the sake of using our time the most wisely. So I'll be giving you a quick tutorial on khichdi. Years and years ago, when I was a young yoga student, one of my early teachers, I remember on a lunch break during a week-long training I was in, she taught me how to make this. And I remember being so touched by the simplicity, the deliciousness, and the sattvic-ness of this food that I remember sort of like bookmarking that experience in my psyche and thinking, this is something I want to continue to share with people in this way, this sort of extension and expression of kindness around food and nourishment. It's important to remember, and I'm just going to be the voice that reminds you that the food that you eat is your first line of defense. Every apple that you consume becomes the blood that is your fuel, right? And so when it's a stressful chapter that we find ourselves in, one of the best ways to assure that we have an indomitable equilibrium is to be eating in a way that's soothing our doshas. So khichdi is a tridoshic food, which means that no matter what your body type is, no matter what in Ayurveda they would call it your constitution, no matter what your constitution is, if you're sort of characterized and defined by wind and air, or if you're more sort of a fiery person, or if you are definitely a grounded, earthy type person, and personality and cell structure and organ function, it doesn't matter where you fall in that broad, inclusive spectrum. This food is going to help you have the brightest caliber of mind, the most open heart, and the most optimistic, optimizing outlook. And not only that, it also helps with your Agni. So in last week's teachings, and even I think in the week before, and off and on throughout all of the things that I offer, the word Agni pops up a lot. So Agni is the fire. And when we do our Qigong and when we do our breathing methodologies, we're always targeting the Agni, which lives right here in our human body. So when the Agni dims, whether it's due to illness or whether it's due to just having a deficiency in the flow of our chi, then we become more susceptible to getting ill, which none of us are interested in right now. And we also become more susceptible to the perennial pathogen of fear and anxiety. I actually came across this great iteration of the word anxiety last week. It was hangxiety. I thought that was great. So hangxiety is when we find ourselves hanging on to things that we cannot affect change around. So when we eat really well, it helps us to as our intuitive default set to be practitioners of surrender, right? And to be, proactive generators and creators of grace. So before I get the food out here on the surface, I just want to bring, the legendary physician of Hippocrates here into the kitchen with us. When he said, let thy food be thy medicine, and let my medicine be food. Wow, did he know what he was talking about, right? So food as medicine. Again, I was saying a moment ago, it's our first line of defense. So I really hope that you explore creating some of this for yourself and for your families in your own kitchen. And I will be putting a post on the Integrative Practices website that'll be a continuum of our time together today. So I always cast my votes for a yellow split mung doll. Aren't they adorable? So, if you were in a mad rush, you could just pop these babies right into the pot and cook them. But I'm not a proponent of that. I really believe in soaking our grains and our legumes because it activates all of the mineralization and it makes them really dynamos for digestion. We want to be able to digest our food so that we can digest experience, right? So I actually pre-soaked, let me get a little hot mitt here. I pre-soaked the mung for about 3 hours this morning, and I've got them cooking in this red pot. Okay, so they're cooking here for us. I'm just going to put this to the side and turn off the fire for a moment. So when making khichdi, there's a variety of different recipes that you can access on the World Wide Web of food inspiration out there. But here, again, I'll give you a closer glimpse of this beautiful spice blend, and it just smells like life. So here we have turmeric, which in Ayurveda is always being reached for because of its anti-inflammatory properties. So if our interior tissues are inflamed either by illness or fear or anxiety or whatever the case may be, it's always going to be more challenging to feel health. So here we have turmeric, we have ginger, we have asafoetida, we have mustard seed, did I say ginger, fenugreek, and cumin, and some sea salt. So this is something that you can play around with in terms of the quantities. Some people like it a little bit heavier on the asafoetida. Some people like it heavier on the ginger. I know for myself, I'm a huge fan of ginger, so I tend to go with a more heavy hand on that. So you can really play around with the quantities of your spices when you're making your khichdi. I know when I first started making it many years ago, I had a heavier hand on the cumin, and so you can kind of get an analytic on what your culinary preferences are and how they're moving around based on what you're reaching for more of. So there's this, and then I have a larger quantity of this in this bowl here. So I'm going to add it. This is such simple food. I believe in times of stress, we should not over complexify things, right? Like we're all trying to figure out how to stay on task in new ways. So the last thing that we need to be doing is freaking out about how we're feeding ourselves in a wisdom way. So I've just added all of the spices. Now if you're like, I don't want to explore the quantities of the spices, I want to have somebody else do it for me so that I can make this process even easier than it already is. If that's the case, I totally recommend the website Banyan Botanicals. They sell a beautiful spice blend that's specifically for this dish. So in India and in Ayurveda, this particular dish of khichdi is it's used in the healing spaces. So when people are recovering from just about anything, this is what they would be getting served. So for today, I'm not cooking it with rice. Um, However, some days I do cook it with rice. So when I cook with rice, I always use a long grain basmati white rice. This particular kind of rice is the most digestible. I'm always interested in optimizing our digestibility so that our chi, our energy body, isn't getting stuck trying to deal with what we've put in it, right? So as practitioners, in integrative practices, we're interested in the whole scope of lifestyle, right? We're interested in all of the meditative movement modalities. We're interested in how we can breathe in a righteous manner. We're interested in the sound technologies that help us feel really vibrant and thrivant and connected. But then we're also interested in becoming managers of the inflow and the outflow, which is food, right? So I'm gonna put this back on the stove. If I were making a pot of khichdi with rice, which like I said today I'm not, I would do 1 part rice and 2 parts of the split mung dal. Okay, so it's a little bit more heavy on the protein side versus the grain side. Okay, so that you're getting more brain power and less of and even the white basmati rice is not going to really be assimilated like a sugar, but just keeping the grains on a minimum. So I'm going to pop this back on the fire, and then I'm going to cook it on low heat. I'm a big fan of slow cooking my food, or any food that I make for people. Maybe you know this, but I'm half Italian, and so making food for people has always been very central to the way in which I feel like I've taken care of people, or that I can take care of people. And I feel like when we slow cook, there's compassion and there's patience in it. So as a chef in my kitchen, even though much of the things that I make are very simple, I still consider myself some kind of a chef. I'm always interested in bridging the meditative and practical concepts of my practices, bridging them into the behaviors of cooking, for example. So I want to show you, before we move on to the kale, I want to show you this beautiful little heart-shaped pot, which if I tip, it's going to spill. But this is an already cooked pot. So just wanted to show you, but it's going to pour all over the island if I do. So you'll just have to trust me. And I wish you could smell it. The aroma is absolutely incredible. And it really is a big wish of mine that once we get through this crazy quarantine, that I can throw open the doors of my house and have you all over for a fine feast of togetherness and celebration and community here, face to face, eye to eye, without a screen interface in between us. So, one last pearl about the khichdi before we move on to the leaves. Something that I have done off and on throughout the many years of being in relationship with khichdi is what I call a mono diet. So a mono diet is basically when you're eating just, khichdi. Maybe you do it for 1 day, maybe you do it for 3 days, maybe you do it for a whole week. The thing about this food is that it's very detoxifying, purifying, and soothing for all the tissues of the body. So that's good news. But it's such a complete food that you can eat it in surety over an extended period of time, trusting that you're getting just about everything that you need. So when I do a mono diet, very oftentimes I'll just eat the stuff, right? But if you feel like you need diversity, and I get it, I love diversity too. If you're eating a bowl of it for breakfast, you may want to try adding a little bit of shredded coconut on top, or maybe some dried cranberries on top, or whatever other kind of dried fruit or nut that you might be feeling magnetized towards, that could enhance your fascination with the food and your willingness to keep reaching for it in the trajectory of a cleanse. And then for lunch and for dinner, add some simple steamed vegetables on top, or you can add what I'm about ready to show you how to make here in a second, which is the massaged kale. and I'm sure that we're all at this point on mute, but I'm wondering how many of you on call today actually massage your kale. So I have pre-washed this kale. You know, just a quick song of praise for our Madison food community. We are so lucky, particularly in this time, to live in a community that prioritizes so much access to clean, good, organic, high-frequency food. Again, everything that you eat becomes the blood that makes you the physical structure that you are. So one thing that I'm a big practitioner of in my kitchen, and I suggest you do it too, is I always soak my leaves at least for an hour before I use them. And it does two things for us. First of all, it washes them, which is always good news, particularly in these times. So it washes them, but it also allows all of the cell wall of the leaf itself, it allows the cell wall to suck up the moisture. So I, as a yogi, am really interested in eating water-rich foods. I can feel an immediate difference when I'm not eating water-rich foods compared to when I am. So I have an RO filter on my kitchen sink, so I'm confident that I'm soaking my leaves in really clean water. So I do that, and I'm just going to pulse them for one last round, and then I'm going to grab this bowl here. This is actually a satisfying act in my views. So you grab the stalk, grab the leaves, and strip the stalk of the leaves. Okay, and I'm just going to do this real quick. So this also ensures that you get a little bit of water in the recipe that's going to become your dressing, if you will, for the kale. So, you know, at the Zen Zone, when I meet with all of you one-on-one, and we work with all the whole portfolio of methodologies, you know, very oftentimes I'm taking care of you. I'm doing some kind of energetic intervention. You know, I'm touching your body. I might be using some kind of oil. I might be doing some kind of massage. And again, here's this bridge work. So I'm not in the room with you, even though I am in the room with you. I'm not in the room with you right now with my hands on your physical body. But look at how I'm doing the same thing, right? I'm washing it. And then I'm gonna massage it, okay? But I'm not gonna massage it just yet. So I'm gonna move this water bath to the counter behind. And then I'm just gonna quickly shred this kale, okay? So that, because when you strip the leaves off of the stalk, you're gonna get bite sizes that are just superhuman. So I just take a second. And this actually is the first step in tenderizing the leaves for you, okay? We're not actually gonna hit this salad with any kind of fire. This is gonna stay raw from the beginning until the time it hits your stomach. Okay, so by tearing it, you're helping to tenderize the leaves, which is good news. Okay, so you could do this to any great length of your choice, depending on how small you want the leaf bits. So here we have this beautiful bowl, green. I love it. I don't know about you, but I feel like I could live on kale. As long as there was a little bit of lemon juice, olive oil, and sea salt to go with it. But if I had to, I could just eat it raw, just like this. So yeah, lemon juice, olive oil, and sea salt. Those are our three simple ingredients. So we have lemon juice. I'm sorry, this is the olive oil. Here's the lemon juice. And then here we have the sea salt. I'm gonna just quickly grab a bowl to mix it up in. So, if you have all the time in the world, hashtag quarantine, which we're in right now, maybe you want to juice your own lemons. So, slice it like so. It's going to be laborious, but again, it can also be really meditative, totally satisfying. So I've got it cut Isn't that beautiful? Love it. I've got it cut halfway, and then I'm just going to twist it in this handheld citrus juicer. So I do have a beautiful Champion juicing machine that I love to use, mostly just for like celery and cucumbers and things like that. But I never use it for citrus. I always juice my citrus by hand, okay? So here I've juiced half a lemon, and I'm gonna kind of gauge. So I just did one bundle of kale, and I think that because it's so alkalinizing for the body, I'm gonna go a little bit more heavy-handed on the lemon for today. So I'm going to pour this fresh squeezed lemon into the bowl. And then I'm going to add, apparently I'm going to add it with my fingers because I can't find my mixing or my measuring spoons. I'm a big fan of, the pinch and the skosh and the smidgen, which are the technical metrics for the feminine way of cooking. So I'm going to go for a hearty pinch of sea salt and add that to the lemon juice. So it's worth knowing that the lemon juice is playing a pretty massive role in tenderizing the leaves of this kale salad. So you want to make sure you include some amount of it, and it depends on what your preference is in terms of taste. Some people really love lemon. Some people are like, whew, I can really feel it on the tissues of the inside of my mouth. Again, dependent upon, what your dosha is, what your constitution is, what your preference is, you can decide how heavy on the lemon. I love lemon, and it's a real helping hand in terms of staying in that felt reality of feeling like you're clean. So I'm going to pour this olive oil. So when I add a recipe onto the website, I will, for the sake of being able to print off a recipe, I'll give us quantities, but I want you to see how I'm trusting myself as a cook in the kitchen. And I'm just feeling it, I'm gauging the quantity, I'm gauging the pour, and I'm trusting my core, okay? So now, I'm gonna grab a fork. I'm just gonna whisk this up like so. I'm gonna pour it over the greens. And this is the fun part. And then you get to put your hands right into the bowl and massage the kale. It's going to break down really fast, and you'll be shocked if you've never done this kind of thing before. You'll be shocked how you'll have this huge brimming bowl. Sometimes I do, depending on whether I'm cooking for myself or cooking for friends or family, I might do as many as 3 or 4 bundles of kale at once. And you can have a huge mixing bowl just bristling with green leaves, and then you end up, once it's all massaged, with this very small quantity. And I'll tip the bowl here in a second so that you can see. This is actually, if you ask me, a very good stress managing hand dance. Really, really satisfying. I wish I could serve you all big forkfuls of this kale, because it's one of the best power foods I have come across in my quest for good, clean nourishment. So here we have a massaged raw kale salad. So friends, this goes so deliciously right on top of a pot of khichdi, okay? So I like to pour my khichdi into my bowl and then put whatever amount of kale I'm looking to have right on top, and then, voila, you have an amazing meal. Let me rinse my hands really quick. So I want to show you how to make one last thing, but before I do that, I want to introduce you to ghee. Here we have ghee. Sometimes we make our own ghee here at the Lighthouse, which is the process of clarifying butter, where you heat it again on a very, 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 very low flame. And then what happens to the butter is that the butter fat will separate from the rest of the body of the product, and you can actually scrape that butter fat off and remove it, and what you're left with is this incredible nectar, which is ghee, okay? For those of you who might be interested in integrative practices, beauty technologies, I actually put ghee underneath my eyes before I go to bed, and I actually do it in the morning. And sometimes I mix it with a little bit of sandalwood oil and a little bit of rose oil. So again, to reiterate, Hippocrates knew what he was talking about when he said, "Let thy food be thy medicine, and let medicine be food." And so what it is that we put on our bodies to take care of our bodies, to make sure that we're not, drying up like fine spice and blowing away with the wind, but being sure that we're staying supple and flexible and malleable and full of ingenuity and moisturized, you can make sure that, what you're putting in is also what you're putting on the outside, so that it's, it's clean, it's non-toxic, it's pure. So ghee, the finishing touch for khichdi is a good dollop of ghee in the bowl, okay? I don't put the ghee in while I'm cooking it. I really try to practice mindfulness around how many times I'm heating up food and how many times I'm heating up the superfoods that go into the end result of the dish. So I am a big believer in taking a spoon of the ghee, however much you feel that you need. Remember, this is good for your brain, okay? The good fats that help us feel like we're on an evenly metered flow of confidence and clarity. Put a little spoon of it into the dish. Sometimes it's fun to just let it melt. Sometimes you want to mix it up. Of course, that's entirely up to you. So ghee, develop a nice relationship with ghee. So any good meal is not complete without some kind of a beverage, right? So we've got the main dish, which is the khichdi. We've got the protein, we've got the grain, we've got the leaves. And then what I wanted to show you is how to make fire lemonade. This is an amazing iteration, in my views, of the fire lemonade, because we're going to add chia seeds, okay? And I'm realizing I neglected to grab something out of my fridge, so I'm going to jump out of the screen for a second. I'll be right back. So for the past 20 years I've been living in Madison, off and on. I've actually moved away twice and then moved back. I'm fully surrendered that I'm a native to this place. But for those 20 years of living in Madison, I've always called Madison the land of milk and honey. But it's also a land of amazing maple syrup. And so that's actually a sweetener that we're going to use. So in Ayurveda, you want to make sure that on the daily that you are satisfying your human biological need to relay with a variety of tastes, okay? And so we're going to satisfy our need for sweet today with a little bit of this maple syrup, okay? So I always put that in first so that I can be sure. I am not a huge fan of tons of sugar in any of its forms. So I go really with a very light hand on the maple syrup. And then, again, because we have all the time in the world right now, or so to speak, maybe you want to juice your own lemons for this fire lemonade. But I'll tell you what I oftentimes do and almost always do when I'm making fire lemonade is I just reach for an organic jar of the lemon juice. And then I put some of this in here. So when I first learned about fire lemonade, it did not include, the suggestion in the recipe did not include chia seeds. But chia seeds have earned themselves a wonderful little folk name of a runner's snack. Okay, so these seeds, if you're not familiar with chia, fantastic little dynamos of protein. They're really beautiful too. chia seeds. Once they hydrate, there's going to be like a gelatinous coating around the core of the seed itself. They're really, really good for your digestion, and they're just power-packed little nutrient-dense seeds. So sometimes I go heavier on the chia, and then again, sometimes I go lighter. When you put the chia seeds into your fire lemonade and you drink it, it's going to help you stay full longer. So for these resiliency recipes of renewal that I'm sharing with you today, I wanted to share with you things that don't cost a lot of money to make, that fill you up undeniable for a great length, and that are very, very easy to freeze back and store in quantity. When I make khichdi, I always make an abundance, and I try to put at least 1 or 2 containers of it back in the freezer, because when I come home from a long work day, or if we've just gotten back from a trip and we need to eat, it's like the best thing to just pop into the pot and thaw out and have like the perfect medicine food right then and there, as if it were fresh made. So one ingredient that I'm realizing I left in my spice cabinet, so bear with me. I'm going to grab my cayenne. So for the fire lemonade, you don't need a lot of cayenne because you don't want to burn the inside of your mouth when you're trying to enjoy it. So go really, really light. I always use a measuring stick of some kind when making this fire lemonade, so that I can be sure that I don't go too heavy-handed on that cayenne. You can always add more, right? So I've added that, and then I'm simply going to add water from the RO tap and mix it up, and then I'll put a canning jar lid on top of this, and I'll let this sit for at least an hour before enjoying it, so that the chia can wake up. Okay, so we've got the khichdi, we've got the kale salad, we've got the fire lemonade, and before I set you free, I want to remind you to include some adaptogens in your diet, okay? Adaptogens are what help us adapt to stress with immense grace, with vigor, with optimism, and so forth, okay? So my favorite few adaptogens are ashwagandha, which is basically Indian ginseng. So this is going to give you, they say it gives you the strength of horses. Who doesn't want that, right? We want to increase our horsepower. For those of you who work with me in the movement modalities, you know that a lot of the technologies that I share with you have to do with strengthening your nervous system and giving your nervous system an upgrade in its horsepower. So you assist also nutritionally when you consume ashwagandha. It's also really good to know that this helps us as a sleep aid. So a nice tea made with ashwagandha before bed can help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up feeling really refreshed. That's good news. Tulsi. For those of you who come to the Zen Zone on the regular and work with me there, you've definitely smelled Tulsi being sent out through the aromatherapy diffuser into the space. I use Tulsi. This is holy basil. So this really helps us to have a levity and to have a brightness and to be able to leverage our sadness into joy and then into peacefulness. Tulsi is a huge ally. This also makes an incredibly delicious tea, something that I try to have in the afternoon at least a couple of times a week. And then shatavari, this is really a good one for the ladies on the call. It's not to say that it's counter-indicated for men, but it's just really, really good for us in creating a really soothing conversation in the systems of our body, in particularly resonant for our feminine system. So it's been wonderful to share a few integrative practices that I find myself talking about to a lot of people conversationally, to give you a visual tutorial here in the lighthouse. That's what I call my house. Thank you so much for being here. Tomorrow from 11:30 to noon, definitely tune in if you can for another 30-minute power practice. Tomorrow we're going to be working with some really beautiful Qigong forms and breath technologies having to do with joy. It's really important during this time that we don't, get shored up in all the doom and gloom, but that we stay very, very centered in cultivating our joy body. So that you can be your own laughing track, right? And then Thursday, we'll also be meeting from 11:30 to 12 noon on the Skype call for some meditative methodologies, and then Friday we'll tune in for sound. So I hope to see you there. Thank you so much. Sat Nam. Namaste.